When the Pinehurst Heights Homeowners Association slapped 72-year-old Navy veteran Ezra Thorne with a $10,000 fine for his so-called unsightly wheelchair ramp, board president Vivian Blackwood didn't even bother to hide her smirk. "Maybe. You should have thought twice before buying here, old man," she sneered, her voice dripping with suburban venom. "This isn't a nursing home." Her sharp heels clacked across the pristine concrete, each step a declaration of her imagined superiority. The faint metallic creak of Ezra's wheelchair underscored her retreat. Mingling with the cloying scent of her expensive perfume, here's what Vivian Blackwood didn't know. Ezra wasn't some helpless pensioner barely scraping by on social security. He wasn't just another worn-down veteran living out his days in a quiet subdivision. Ezra Thorne was the silent owner of 423 homes, nearly half the entire neighborhood purchased with surgical precision over 15 years. All under the shell of Thornfield Properties LLC, his real estate empire was worth $47 million. Every violation, every fine, every predatory act the HOA had pulled. He had been documenting it all. And Vivian, she was about to learn what happens when you mistake a disabled war hero for an easy mark. Ezra never wanted this life. He hadn't dreamed of becoming a landlord or wielding quiet power over hundreds of homes. That wasn't his story. His story began 3 years earlier in a sterile hospital room, where fluorescent lights hummed above peeling ceiling tiles and the air reeked of disinfectant. His wife, Martha, her body frail from cancer, clutched his calloused hand. "Promise me," she whispered, her breath faint but urgent. "Promise me you'll help people who can't help themselves, Ezra." Her jasmine perfume, faint but unmistakable, still lingered on her nightgown. That scent would haunt him forever. Ezra, a 30-year veteran of Navy intelligence whose spine had been shattered by Gulf War shrapnel, had retired to Pinehurst Heights, expecting peace. A modest home, a beat-up 2008 Honda Civic, and mornings. Clipping grocery coupons, that was all he wanted. But Martha's death changed everything. And when his childless uncle left him $2.3 million, Ezra faced a choice. Watch corporate vultures and HOA tyrants hollow out his community, or honor Martha's dying wish. So he did what he'd always done in the service. He went invisible, operating. Through Thornfield Properties, Ezra quietly scooped up foreclosures, estate sales, and distressed homes. He didn't buy them to get rich. He bought them to keep rent affordable for teachers, mechanics, and retired folks like himself. Pinehurst Heights wasn't small. 847 homes stretched across manicured streets, all governed by an HOA with $340 monthly fees and rulebooks, thicker than military manuals. The morning air smelled of diesel from landscaping trucks, drowned out by the constant hum of central air units. Even the glossy HOA newsletters felt expensive because they were funded by fines, dues. Rosa Martinez, a young paralegal who rented a duplex in the neighborhood, had started to notice. She whispered her suspicions to Ezra once at the mailbox. "There. Targeting the elderly and the disabled," she murmured, glancing around nervously. "That's illegal. It's called selective enforcement." "I've been keeping notes," Ezra nodded, saying nothing. He was used to being underestimated. Vivian Blackwood was in her 3rd term as HOA president. Her weapon wasn't a rifle or a drone strike. It was bureaucracy, wielded with surgical cruelty. Her white BMW X5 gleamed in the sun, parked like a battleship in front of the HOA clubhouse. She wore designer athleisure that cost more than a month of Social Security, her blonde bob always immaculately styled. Her specialty? Crushing the vulnerable with microscopic violations. While ignoring identical infractions on her allies' properties, when Ezra installed his wheelchair ramp, doctor ordered, city permitted, and completely legal, Vivian pounced. Unauthorized structural modification, she declared, her painted nails tapping on the violation form, never mind that her own fence violated setback requirements by 6 inches. At the board meeting, she staged a spectacle. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in folding chairs as she announced the $10,000. Fine. Only Rosa voted against it. Maybe you should have thought twice before buying here, old man. This isn't a nursing home. The words echoed against the cinder block walls. Ezra said nothing. He simply nodded once and wheeled away, the silence louder than any outburst. Later that night, Ezra sat at his kitchen table, the surface buried beneath stacks of property deeds and HOA newsletters marked with red ink. Crickets chirped outside. Streetlights cast long shadows across the documents. He picked up his phone. "Marcus," he said quietly. His voice carried the weight of 3 decades in intelligence. "It's time. Pull the Thornfield files. It's all 423 properties." He paused, staring at Martha's photo on the wall. "Yes, I know what this means. She'd want justice, not just revenge." The next morning at the grocery store, Rosa leaned toward him in the cereal aisle. "They're breaking their own bylaws." "I've been documenting everything," she whispered, Dodd. Ezra just smiled. She had no idea that she was giving legal advice to her own landlord. Vivian wasted no time. Within 48 hours, Ezra's mailbox was flooded with violation letters. Mailbox too high, $250 fine. Trash been visible after. Pickup, $500. Bird feeders excessive, $350. Her nephew Brad was promoted to HOA inspector. He snapped photos of Ezra's property daily, his phone clicking like a paparazzi camera. But the real damage came disguised as accidents. Monday, HOA landscapers sprayed industrial weed killer, killing Martha's beloved rose bushes. Tuesday, the utility company accidentally cut his cable during a telehealth appointment. Wednesday, his sprinkler system malfunctioned, flooding his driveway. Neighbors whispered sympathy, but no one dared intervene. That was the point. Vivian was running a campaign of psychological warfare, sleep deprivation, financial pressure, social isolation, textbook enemy tactics. Only this time the enemy wore designer sneakers instead of fatigues. Ezra recognized it immediately. He'd studied these strategies in the Gulf, so he responded the only way he knew how: patience and documentation. While Brad photographed his supposed violations, Ezra documented everyone else's. Vivian's fence, 6 inches over. The property line. The treasurer's unpermitted deck extension. The secretary's illegal home business signs. From her kitchen window, Rosa sometimes saw Ezra taking photos and shaking his head. She thought grief had made him obsessive, and she looked closer. "You're building a selective enforcement case," she whispered one morning at the post office. Ezra smiled faintly. Intelligence gathering beats emotional reactions. Meanwhile, Rosa dug deeper into the HOA's financials. Her Freedom of Information Act request revealed something stunning. The legal budget had ballooned by 300% in 18 months, with massive payments going to consulting firms, suspiciously linked to board members' relatives. The HOA wasn't just corrupt, it was a racket, Vivian escalated. Ezra's fines ballooned to $18,500 in just 3 weeks. Then came the anonymous call to adult protective services, a report of a senile old man living in unsafe conditions. The investigator found nothing wrong. Ezra's home was immaculate. His mind sharp, but the public humiliation was the point. Finally, Vivian delivered the foreclosure threat in person. She posed beside his mailbox for photos like a conquering general, holding the paperwork aloft. "Pay up or get out, old man," she sneered. "This community has standards." Neighbors watched from behind curtains, their faces pale with shame. But Ezra didn't look broken. He looked satisfied, like a chess master who had just maneuvered his opponent into checkmate. He folded the letter carefully, slid it into his evidence file, and wheeled inside, humming an old Navy tune. That night, Rosa heard his voice through her open bedroom window. "Yes, Marcus. The 30-day disclosure period starts now. They just triggered the federal complaint. No, let them keep digging. They'll bury themselves." She'll lay awake, her blood running cold. Vivian Blackwood thought she had destroyed him. She had no idea she had just stepped into his trap. The foreclosure threat hit local news faster than Ezra expected, but not the way he'd hoped. Vivian leaked it first. The morning paper carried the headline: "Disabled veteran refuses to follow community rules." A bright red arrow pointed to Ezra's wheelchair ramp labeled HOA holdout. On Channel 7, Vivian sat in a studio chair, dabbing at fake tears with a silk handkerchief. Her blonde bob gleamed under the lights. Some people think military service entitles them to special treatment, she said, her voice quivering just enough to seem sincere. But rules protect everyone's property values. The anchor nodded sympathetically, the script written perfectly in Vivian's favor. Ezra sipped his coffee and stared at the screen. The bitterness in his mug matched the bitterness in his chest. She was turning him into the villain, and it was working. With her media victory secured, Vivian doubled down. Tree services accidentally dropped heavy branches on Ezra's old Honda Civic, shattering the windshield. Pest control sprayed toxic chemicals near his air intake, forcing him to seal his windows during the hottest week of summer. Security patrol cars idled outside his home at night, their walkie-talkies hissing with static. It was harassment elevated to military precision. Light flooding his bedroom every half hour, boots crunching gravel outside his window, false complaints. Filed with every city office imaginable, Ezra recognized the strategy. Break down the target until he cracks. But instead of breaking, Ezra documented everything. His Navy training had drilled patience into his bones. Every insult, every accident, every false report was evidence. Vivian thought she was grinding him into dust. She was actually building his case, brick by brick. Meanwhile, Rosa Martinez wasn't just watching from the sidelines. Her paralegal instincts told her something bigger was happening. Her Freedom of Information Act requests revealed contracts worth $847,000, all no-bid deals approved by Vivian's husband, City Councilman Derek Blackwood. Landscaping, legal services, consulting companies that existed only on paper, owned by Blackwood relatives. They're not just stealing from the HOA, she whispered to Ezra one evening in the library, the air thick with the musty smell of old books. They're stealing from the entire city. Ezra's calm reply chilled her. I've been following the money for 18 months. Marcus isn't just my lawyer. He's preparing federal racketeering charges. Rosa stared at him, realizing for the first time that Ezra hadn't simply been enduring, he'd been orchestrating. The harassment spread. Anyone who sided with Ezra found themselves in the crosshairs. Rosa's son was fined $2,000 for a basketball hoop that had been approved years earlier. 84-year-old Mrs. Morgan was slapped with a $5,000 fine for her garden gnomes, the same ones that had decorated her lawn peacefully for 15 years. Tom Kowalski's memorial oak, planted for his fallen son, was mysteriously chopped down by HOA contractors. The message was clear. Support Ezra, and you'll pay. But fear has a breaking point. Rosa opened her living room one evening to 12 neighbors, each clutching violation letters and horror stories. Mrs. Morgan sobbed in the corner, whispering, "They take my house now. Like Social Security not enough." The room went silent until Ezra spoke, his voice low but commanding. Tomorrow morning, Marcus files federal civil rights charges. We're not just fighting an HOA, we're dismantling a criminal enterprise. For the first time, hope flickered. In the neighbor's eyes, Vivian, sensing victory, scheduled an emergency meeting to ratify Ezra's foreclosure. Cameras rolled as she strutted to the podium, her slideshow ready. Photos of Ezra's ramp, charts showing declining property values, enforcement statistics designed to terrify the crowd. Community standards protect everyone's investment, she declared, her voice sharp with false authority. But the mood in the room had shifted. Rosa stood, her hands trembling around a manila folder. Mrs. Blackwood, she said firmly, I have concerns about selective enforcement patterns and financial irregularities. Vivian's mask slipped for a split second. It's an appropriate speculation. Rosa pressed on, according to city records. Your husband approved $847,000 in no-bid contracts to companies owned by your relatives. Meanwhile, board members with identical violations were never cited. The room erupted in whispers. Vivian tried to regain control, her voice rising. These conspiracy theories have no place, then. Ezra wheeled to the microphone. The room fell silent. His presence at the podium transformed the atmosphere. Somehow, his wheelchair looked less like a medical device and more like a command chair. Mrs. Blackwood, Ezra said, his voice carrying 30 years of military authority. 3 years ago, my dying wife asked me to help people who couldn't help themselves. I kept that promise by purchasing 423 properties in this neighborhood. 49.9% of Pinehurst Heights. Gasps filled the room. Vivian's face drained of color. 49.9%, she whispered, the number falling from her lips like a death sentence. That's right, Ezra continued. While you've been terrorizing widows and veterans, I've been documenting every illegal act, every fraudulent contract, every act of harassment, not for revenge, for justice. The double doors at the back of the room opened. A man in a navy blue suit stepped forward, flashing federal credentials. Vivian Blackwood, he announced. You're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and domestic terrorism. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed like a gunshot. Derek. Blackwood bolted for the exit and ran straight into 2 FBI agents who tackled him to the floor. The room exploded in chaos. Agent Sarah Morgan, of the FBI's Organized Crime Division, stepped forward. Mr. Thorne contacted federal authorities 18 months ago, she told the stunned residents. His evidence has enabled the most comprehensive RICO case against HOA corruption in federal history. Neighbors stared at Ezra in awe. The quiet man they'd pitied for years had been running a counterintelligence operation under their noses. Federal agents wheeled in bankers' boxes of evidence, recorded phone calls, fake invoices, shell company ledgers, even a digital spreadsheet, the Blackwood extraction database, ranking households by vulnerability and profit potential. Mrs. Morgan? Priority target number 3. Exploit limited. English extract $15,000. Tom Kowalski. Target number 7. Pressure via memorial. Desecration. Ezra Thorne. Priority target number 1. Disabled veteran. Extract $50,000. Use medical equipment as leverage. The crowd went silent. This wasn't mismanagement. This was organized crime. Even from behind bars, the Blackwoods weren't finished. Vivian smuggled a phone into federal lockup. Destroy everything, she hissed to her network. The retaliation was swift and brutal. Rosa's car, firebombed in her driveway. Ezra's kitchen window shattered by a sniper's bullet. Tom Kowalski nearly killed when an explosive device detonated under his truck. Federal safe houses attacked by hired mercenaries. Pinehurst Heights turned into a war zone. Helicopters thundered overhead. FBI tactical teams patrolled suburban streets like they were Baghdad. But every attack was caught on Ezra's hidden cameras. Every escalation added decades to the charges. Let them keep digging, Ezra told Agent Morgan calmly. Every bullet, every bomb, it all goes in the file. The federal courthouse overflowed with cameras. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland himself prosecuted the case. These defendants didn't just steal money, he thundered. They declared war on American communities. The jury watched. Recordings of Derek Blackwood ordering a sarin gas attack on Ezra's home. His voice echoed through the speakers. Kill everyone in a 3-block radius if necessary. No witnesses. The jurors flinched. Then Ezra took the stand. When Martha died, he said, his voice steady, she made me promise to help people who couldn't help themselves. So I endured 3 years of systematic terrorism, not as a victim. As a witness, every insult, every fine, every attack, I documented it for this moment. The defense accused him of entrapment. Ezra's reply cut the air like a blade. I didn't force your clients to commit terrorism. I simply refused to be terrorized. Jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty. On all 847 counts. Vivian and Derek. Life without parole. Their mercenaries? Death sentences. Their cronies. Decades behind bars. Justice had arrived. 2 years later, Pinehurst Heights looked different. Children played in yards again. Neighbors shared barbecues without fear of violation notices. The HOA office was gone, replaced with a community garden blooming with roses, Martha's roses. Congress had passed the Ezra Thorne Community Protection Act. ensuring no HOA could ever again terrorize vulnerable residents unchecked. Ezra himself. He remained the same humble man, rolling through the streets each morning in his old wheelchair. Neighbors stopped him often now to thank him, to hug him, to honor him. At the monthly town hall, he spoke softly but firmly. If your neighborhood is being terrorized, document everything. Contact federal authorities. Remember, bullies only act powerful until someone calls their bluff. The standing ovation lasted minutes, echoing down the quiet streets of Pinehurst Heights. And somewhere, Ezra liked to believe Martha was smiling. Justice had been sweeter than revenge.